Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master, and Merry Christmas. Today is Christmas Day. I hope that you guys are having a good one, whether you celebrate or not, wherever you are. I hope today is a good day for you. Um, for me personally, I love Christmas ever since I was a kid, it was always when I got the new toys, you know what I mean? So to this day, every Christmas, there's toys involved. So I'm having a good day. I hope you guys are too. And to kind of celebrate the occasion, this video is going to be me talking a little bit about the various Christmas games that we've ran over the years in our game. And I hope you really enjoy this because I really do. I've said this in some other episodes. There's an ebb and a flow to it. I kind of report on what we did, whether it was good or bad. Personally, I think this was good stuff. I hope you do too. So, to get into this one, I'm going to start with Santa Claus. And that is Claus, spelled Claws, as in adamantium claws, right? So Santa Claus is a character in our game that was created by Kelson Barber. Back in 1996, I went to college with Kelson. We had become best friends. Our college let out over the holidays, and for us, that meant that the last day of school was before Thanksgiving, so they let all the kids go home for Thanksgiving. And then we didn't come back again until like the middle of January. So we had a really nice long Christmas vacation at my college. And all the time that we normally would have spent in class then, me and my circle of friends were like, man, that's awesome. We got more time for gaming. So so Carlson pitched me this idea for a character, and I'm gonna tell you about him now. So he's not the actual Santa, right? The pitch was that because first of all, in like Marvel Comics, Santa Claus is real and teamed up with She-Hulk, right? In the John Byrne run, he's probably done other stuff over the years, but I personally haven't seen it myself. But when I was reading the Byrne run of She-Hulk, she teams up with Santa at one point. It kind of blew my mind. And then over at DC, just very recently, there was a famous issue with Superman and Santa Claus, actually, where Superman was kind of like a kid again in a way, emotionally speaking, I mean, not physically. And all the way back to the Golden Age. Golden Age Superman was doing stuff with Santa Claus all the time. So there is a Santa Claus, right? This, though, is a mall Santa. This is a different person who's dressing up as Santa Claus and who is using the name, right? And so the first thing Kelson said to me, which I thought was kind of funny, is he wanted Santa to hit on the moms. So when the single mom shows up with her kid and her kid is on Santa's lap to have his picture taken or whatever and tell Santa I want to, whatever, a toy train or whatever for Christmas, he wanted Santa to basically have game. And he wanted Santa to hit on the mom. And then one of the other things that I thought was kind of funny is he specified he wanted Santa to smoke cigars, and he was specifically thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And Schwarzenegger is a huge cigar aficionado in real life. And I think Carlson was thinking of an old Arnold movie called Commando, where the action is like cheesy and it's over the top and stuff like that. And that was kind of like the spirit of this character in a way, is he wanted everything to be kind of amped up and over the top and very kind of like macho and stuff like that. And I thought that was kind of funny. The next component of the character I thought was interesting was he really wanted the character to have a bag of holding. And I told him, I was like, I really don't know. And I could probably swing it now, but at the time I was new to being a game master. I was like, I really am not sure how I'd make a bag of holding in the DC hero system. And he's like, well, here's what I want to do though. Is like, I want it to be full of toys. And he's like, so probably not literally all the toys in the world, because God knows how much that would weigh, but like a lot of stuff. And I was like, okay. And he's like, but it all needs to, like, if you look at it though, it looks like Santa's bag of toys from the outside. And I said, that's fine, you know. And then he said, I want Omni gadgets like Batman has. And so I want to be able to reach into the bag, and then whatever I pull out, I have to sub an Omni gadget for that item. And I thought that was kind of cool. And I was like, that's fine. And then he added the thing, and he's like, and so toys probably are not exactly useful for, every situation. He probably couldn't think of a toy to do a thing here or there with. But he's like, can it just be Christmas presents in general? So for instance, if he wants to, he can reach in the bag and he could pull out like a power drill that's like a battery powered power drill, and sub his Omni gadget for the stats. He would give a power drill, and then he could attack a guy with it. Like stick it in his neck and drill him, should the need arise. And so I got what he was saying. He wanted this to be funny and so on and so forth. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And then he, again, going with the macho thing, Santa was always like chugging bottles of Jack Daniels and stuff like that. And he was just very over the top, and he was getting the numbers of all the single moms and so on and so forth. And I think he also specified he wanted Santa to wear army boots. So it wasn't like the kind of boots with the buckles and stuff. And I guess that just kind of signified that Santa was like, I don't know, battle oriented or whatever, he was a fighter. And I was like, that's fine. So that was the Santa Claus character, right? And so that's where this is all going, is Santa becomes kind of the leader of this group of Christmas characters then. And so then any other character we made had to kind of match that vibe. It had to fit in with the original Christmas character, right? So all of our Christmas stuff becomes a little more kind of like hardcore than it normally is, you know? So I'm real quick. I'll say this too, because there's this notorious Christmas adventure that I think it's probably our most famous Christmas thing we've ever done. And it was hilarious. It would be really hard for you to think to like appreciate how funny this is when you can't see me kind of acting it out, because it's a big body language kind of a thing. But at any rate, you may have heard me mention in other videos that we were huge fans of the X-Men animated series. And like I said, this particular adventure took place in 1996. So the X-Men animated series was like a big deal. Pretty much everybody I was friends with loved that show. And something we had done in the game is, in the pilot of the cartoon, Sentinels attack a shopping mall. And we had completely ripped that off. There for a while, like when I was in high school, if we wanted to play on like a Friday or Saturday night and the game master didn't have anything ready, we just did Sentinels attack the mall, right? And it was just an excuse to roll dice, and we would deliver what we thought were like funny one-liners and stuff. So we were like laughing and eating pizza and just having a great time, right? So Sentinels at the Mall was like a tradition for us, right? So for this particular one, my friend Ryan comes home for the holidays that year, and he had played Torch and Pulsar and stuff like that. And so Ryan was playing that character again. And he's like, "Hey man, run me a game. Like, I'm home for Christmas. I want to play a game. I miss playing." And I was like, "I don't have anything ready." And he's like, "Sandals in the mall, dude." And I was like, "Fair enough." And so we start off, and the opening scene is kind of like Santa Claus, and he's got this kid on his lap, and he's like, "What do you want for Christmas, little Johnny or whatever?" And Johnny's like, "I want a train." And he's like, "That's cool. Hey, do you got a dad at home? Where's your mom single? What's what's your mom's favorite this or that or whatever, and the kid will say whatever, and then after the kid gets off his lap, Santa goes over and is like talking to the mom, getting her phone number. So that's kind of the opening scene, and I think Carlson threw in something like, "Why does your breath smell like whiskey, Santa?" So there's a lot of that. Santa always smelled like Jack Daniels and cigar smoke. Um, so then a Sentinel attacks, and we would rip off Jurassic Park, so you feel the vibration before you see anything because the Sentinel is approaching in the parking lot. You can hear the distant clatter of property damage, basically, and car alarms going off from being shaken, and so on and so forth. And so Santa goes out, and of course, he's played by Kelson. Torch shows up on the scene, he's played by Ryan. And there is a Sentinel that it has undergone a refit. It has had pieces welded onto it. It has received a new paint job, yada, 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 and it is a giant nutcracker. And so the Sentinel nutcracker is attacking the mall. And so that gets everybody's attention. They're like, well, that's new. Um, and then on its shoulder is what appears to be the Easter Bunny. And I'll just spoil it for you. It's not really the actual Easter Bunny. We had done stuff with there was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles role-playing game. We had an insane rabbit mutant because in Palladium, one of the things they deal with that a lot of other games don't is insanity rules. And sometimes when an animal mutates, Ninja Turtle style, they just can't handle it. They just snap, right? And so this particular rabbit was convinced he was the Easter Bunny. And so he has like an Easter basket full of what we called grenades. And so these were just normal hand grenades handed to look like Easter eggs. And he's throwing them at Christmas shoppers because he hates Christmas. Because according to him, everybody loves Christmas and nobody cares about Easter. So this is his revenge or whatever, right? And so, in pretty short order, like Torch had this thing where he was a gadgeteer, he could build stuff. He built this thing called the Flame Gauntlet. And I described it as kind of looking like a yellow version of the old Nintendo Power Glove. And so normally he could shoot fire out of his hands like a lot of comic book characters can. Well, what he could do is he could shoot the fire out of the hand the gauntlet was on, and the gauntlet would start to charge, and it would start to grow like a spear made out of concentrated fire. And so the idea was every round, a few more points of damage gets added to how much damage that spear does. So the longer he charges it, the more damage he does. So he charges it, and then when he's decided it's tough enough, he throws it and he hits that rabbit. He blows the rabbit off the shoulder of this sentinel, hits the ground, smoking, um, alive, by the way. He would return and torture players for later game sessions. But so the rabbit's defeated, and now everybody just has to deal with the Nutcracker Sentinel. And it won't come across very well on the microphone, but I do a pretty good impression of the Sentinels from X-Men, the animated series, where they're like, halt, unregistered mutant, right? Sounds bad, to you, but like if you were here in person, because I have a crappy microphone, it sounds pretty good to my players. They like the Sentinel voice. So instead of saying the normal stuff Sentinels say, it's been reprogrammed so it says things like ho ho ho, Merry Christmas, while simultaneously shooting energy blasts at you trying to kill you. So they start to defeat this thing, and so Santa reaches in the bag and pulls out claws, and sort of think of like the Shredder from Ninja Turtles, how he wears those things. There's like a band going over like the palm of his hand. So then there's like a strip of metal on the back of the hand, and then there's claws coming off of it, right? I believe that is an actual ninja weapon. I have no idea what it's called, but that was the idea, was that it was in the bag because this was going to be a Christmas present for somebody who was really into ninja stuff. So Santa pulls out, and he's got two of them, like Wolverine, and this is to justify the name Santa Claus. And so he like Wolverines his way up the robot, and we're saying Santa has super strength because of the ability to lift this bag that is this like insanely heavy bag. Uh, and I can't remember if I mentioned this already or not, but then Santa would hit people with the bag and they would take like huge amounts of damage because of how heavy this thing is. But because of all that strength to be able to lift the thing, he, you know, Wolverines his way up this Sentinel, and it has a thing on its chest, kind of like an arc reactor, like Iron Man has, right? So it starts to claw it, kind of like the seam around this arc reactor. It gets it out. It goes in the chest. And so then the Sentinel, he's in there slashing stuff up, cutting wires and things like that. And the whole time, by the way, Torch is outside of the robot, hitting it with fireballs and stuff, doing damage. So the Sentinel is the most worried about the unarmored interior components that are getting destroyed, right? And so it wants to kill Santa Claus, and it can't because it can shoot energy blasts out of the palms of its hands, right? But it doesn't want to shoot into its own chest. It tries to stick its hand in there and feel around for him, and then Santa's like putting his back to like the wall that is basically this gigantic metal rib cage of the Sentinel. And so it can't reach him, and so on and so forth. And then while all this is happening, while he's distracted, Torch runs around behind, charges up a particularly nasty flame spear and throws it. And Ryan's sense of humor was like he loved dirty jokes and stuff like that. And so he hits this Sentinel right in the butt, like perfect bullseye kind of thing. Because like it was a critical success. It was a massive critical success. And so he blows this hole not only into the where its butthole would be, right? But all the way up through the torso and everything where stuff was spraying at Santa. We said Santa was like superhuman to go with that super strength. We gave him like a high body and stuff. So he takes it, but he's like, "Hey, you're spraying me with crap." And and so he looks down and now he can see out. He can look straight down and there's just like this huge hole where he can see the Sentinel's ankles and stuff as it's taking a step on the ground and walking around and doing things. So he has to be careful not to fall out of it, blah, blah, blah. And the Sentinel um gets a like a what would you call it? The parking lot poles uh out of the mall parking lot. It rips one off and it tries to stick it in its chest to kill Santa, but it doesn't have a good angle, right? Because he's like back against that wall. Basically, Santa would be like hiding behind the thing's nipple. Does that make sense? So he's like sticking, and I apologize for my language or whatever. I try to keep the channel pretty G rated, but at any rate, it doesn't have a good angle. So the Sentinel reasons that if I can't put it in through that hole and kill him before he kills me, I'll have to use this new hole that Torch has created for me, which will give me the angle I need, right? So it bends over, and this is where normally I act this out, and I've had people in tears already doing this. The Sentinel bends over, reaches around behind himself with a parking lot pole, and sticks it up in this hole, and is trying to stab Kelson with it. And he rolls and fails, and so on and so forth. And so as the thing is coming at Kelson's face, Santa grabs the pole and like pushes it up and out of the chest thing there, right? And then I can't remember, a third guy had showed up and I can't remember who this is now. I don't think it was Powerhouse, but it was somebody else is there. And then they bend I think Torch tells them to. It's like bend the end of the pole. And so the part of this pole sticking out of the arc reactor hole in the chest, they bend it down at like a right angle. And then the Sentinel is trying to pull the pole back out so it can like try to attack Santa again. And so this Sentinel, this giant Nutcracker in the mall parking lot, now looks like it is sliding the pole in and out. Right? And granted, we were young, we were immature, we're still immature. People were in tears. I guess you had to be there. And granted, we'd had a few drinks in us at that point. There was some eggnog and stuff, and people were in tears. And that was the most memorable part of that adventure was this Sentinel doing this. And then the whole time he's just kind of programmed to be saying random Christmas sayings like ho 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 and stuff like that. So that was pretty funny. And then they kill it, of course. Santa eventually cuts enough wires inside of this thing's chest, so on and so forth, that shuts off. So the police show up, the superheroes scatter, the police show up, and in front of everybody, there's a giant Nutcracker with a pole up his butt. And over with his hand on the pole and stuff. And good times. So that was that adventure. That's the famous Nutcracker Sentinel adventure. Yeah, so I was going to talk about some of the other characters. I made channel art this week for all the characters that people have played. I'm going to start in a reading order up here on the top left-hand corner with Blitzen the reindeer. So we came up with this thing because we decided because we'd done more and more stuff with Santa Claus. And by the way, we had decided after a while that Santa was actually one of the John Redbridges because people kept noticing certain similarities between them, and it was kind of becoming a thing. And Redbridge wears a lot of red, and and he hits on girls, and he's got a beard, and he smokes cigars, and so on and so forth. So after a while, it was like that'd be kind of cool if it's just one of the Redbridges is kind of a little crazier than the others. Um, so we said that was the case. And like I've said before, John Redbridge has gone by many names over the years. He used to be, Shakespeare called him Oberon, and the Germans called him Beowulf, and the English called him Arthur. But he used to be Dagda, right? That the ancient Irish called him Dagda way back when. And that is all detailed on other adventures on the channel. Check those out if you haven't. But so we decided if he's going to be Santa, he needs reindeer, right? And so I don't know how familiar you are with Celtic mythology, but there's this character from Celtic mythology called Finn McCool or Fionn MacCoomhale, right? But in America, we say Finn McCool. And he's pretty cool. It's kind of out of the scope of this particular video for me to go on too much about him. But he had a girlfriend, and some people I've heard argue that the girlfriend is actually the very first instance in literature, whatever you want to call it, of a werewolf, or excuse me, a were creature, right? Because she's not a wolf, she's a deer. That's where this is going. She's a were deer. And depending on what years, those folk tales were told, that might actually kind of predate stories of werewolves and, all this other stuff. And I'm not trying to argue that that is the case. But some people think it's the case, right? So she's sort of noteworthy. She's famous in certain circles. I'll put it that way. But so we decided to connect it, right? And so again, like I mentioned in a bunch of other videos on my channel, I was a big fan in the 90s of the White Wolf role-playing games, and they had one called Werewolf the Apocalypse, and I thought it was really cool. And something I liked about Werewolf the Apocalypse was they gave them 5 forms. So your first form looks human, right? The second form is like the classic like Universal Monsters Wolfman, old 1930s kind of Wolfman, where it's still kind of close to basically a human being, right? But like really hairy. And then the third form is like more of the modern depictions of werewolves where they're like really, really tall and they're kind of like furries and so on and so forth. And then the fourth version or the fourth form rather is like a giant, like a cave wolf or a dire wolf kind of a thing. And then that fifth form is like a normal wolf, right? And they kind of apply that formula to almost all of their were creatures. So I was like, that'd be kind of cool to do with reindeer, right? Like if you want to take an idea like Santa's reindeer, and it's like, how do you make that like badass? Like I feel like that's hard to do. But we were like, that'd be kind of cool. And so we did it that way. We came up with the idea that they were these Celtic warriors. They were, I don't know, again, how familiar people are, but there's this thing in Irish mythology called the Fianna, and they're a group of warriors, and they travel around and so on and so forth. But typically, the idea is there are 9 members called Fenids who are members of Fianna, and then the 10th guy is the leader guy that they follow. And we were like, oh, that's like a really good fit, right? So we could have a Fianna of Werdeer, and the 10th guy they follow then is our Santa Claus, right? It's really, yeah, that's kind of neat. So we did that, and we ran a couple of adventures of that, and it was surprisingly serious. Whereas Santa Claus had been like funny, and it all started as like kind of a parody of, various other things. The Where Deer games we ran were just like straight fantasy stuff, right? Set in the past. And then because they're were creatures, they have these incredibly long lives. So they're doing stuff through the centuries like Highlanders. Um, and it in like those early games basically had nothing to do with Christmas whatsoever. And so by the time you get to the modern era, the idea is that they're all, first of all, they all share the same ancestor, which is their great 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 grandparents or whatever are Finn McCool and his lover. That was that chick that was the were deer, right? Though that's the genesis of this family line. But then with each of these kind of 9 guys, it becomes a father to son tradition where the all the dads are teaching their sons how to become warriors. And so then by the time you get to the 20th century, they have the names that we would associate with Santa's deer, right? Including Rudolph, by the way. And we never tackled the red nose thing. We said the other 8 just have a naturally black nose. And then Rudolph, it didn't glow or anything. We never said it couldn't. He might have had some power we never saw him use, like the illusion power or something like that. And we just have never addressed it because we never found a version of that we were happy with. But but yeah, so one of these guys was then Blitzen. And Blitzen was played by my brother-in-law Scott. And he had been playing a lot of Thor related characters, whether it was Thor or Beta Ray Bill or Thunderstrike or whoever. Like because Scott is just, he loves the fantasy genre, and he has a lot of trouble playing in the superhero genre. And with a character like Thor, he's kind of a fantasy character surrounded by supers. So that's kind of what the deal is there. But so he played him, and I can't remember what weapon we gave him because we gave all of these guys like melee weapons. In a weird way, we were kind of inspired by Ninja Turtles because the Ninja Turtles are kind of like furries, you know what I mean? These anthropomorphic animal stories, but they're not really cutesy. It's still an action kind of a thing. So we'd done that, and then each guy got a weapon. So I can't remember if Blitzen had a hammer. I want to say we told Scott to like quit using hammers basically because he wanted to use, like, he wanted every single character to have a hammer basically. But we did kind of base the stats on Thor from Marvel. And mind you, there's kind of multiple ways to look at that. I'm talking about classic, like the 80s write up for Thor. And there's stuff he can put on, like I think he's got like a belt of strength and stuff like that. I think he's got some kind of special wrist bracers he can wear. And when he puts all these things on, it keeps pumping up his strength to higher and higher levels. We didn't do any of that, right? So I'm talking about Thor without all that. So then his strength is like monstrous or unearthly or something along those lines. And we made all of the reindeer basically on that level. Um, so yeah, like the reindeer were shockingly awesome. I loved the reindeer stuff. And so then I'll talk about Frosty next. I'll start going in order here, like a reading order. Frosty the Snowman. We actually stuck pretty close to the old, which, if it's not obvious, a lot of the inspiration for this stuff was the old Rankin Bass claymation Christmas specials, right? So Frosty was like a more action-oriented version of that, but we still kind of stuck to the idea. And so I actually ran a game set in the Golden Age because the Frosty story is there's a magician who was the villain. And to me, that just sounded like a very Golden Age thing you would see in an old comic book. So the magician's top hat is what brings Frosty to life. So we had done it that way. And I had the characters defeat the magician in an adventure just to kind of like establish that that guy exists and he's bad and so on and so forth. And so then when Frosty shows up, we really don't do a Frosty origin story. We just say he's wearing the magician's hat. So we establish the hat exists and now we establish Frosty's wearing it and so on and so forth. And so Frosty needs to keep the hat on because if you knock the hat off, he just freezes in place, basically, no pun intended, until somebody else grabs the hat and sticks it back on him, and then he can resume actions in combat, right? We gave him the broom, and he was smacking people with it and stuff, and kind of like a Donatello kind of a thing there. But it was pretty cool. Frosty was pretty cool. He was played by my daughter. She loves water, and then like a lot of the characters she plays are somehow, they have powers, like whether it's water powers or steam powers or ice powers, which was the case with Frosty. That's kind of her thing there. So Frosty was very cool. Again, no pun intended. The gingerbread men were actually the creations of Mrs. Claus, who we have down here under the reindeer, and her name is Jessica. And so, spoiler, she hooks up with our Santa Claus, right? They fight Krampus together, who's the guy in the middle there. All these characters do the Krampus fight. Like we kind of ran games for each individual character first. And the irony is we did this before the Marvel Cinematic Universe was a thing. We just happened to basically follow that exact same format where everybody got their own individual game and then we bring them all together as a team, you know. And the villain they had to fight then was Krampus. And it was really very straightforward. It was like Santa is like, and everybody go to some house to deliver presents one night, and they see Krampus sneaking around in the backyard, and they go down and beat on him. And there's no plot to that game so much as it was physical. It was just a beat 'em up. And they defeated Krampus, and but then that was actually the first time Santa meets Jessica. And so she thinks he's really hot and she's digging him. But then one of her things is uh, like you smell like cigars and whiskey, and that ends now. We're switching you over to like milk and cookies, and I'm going to turn you into a proper Santa. And then her other thing she was doing was the power that my wife played her, by the way. The power that Jessica has is she can bake things that become like sentient minions. So she bakes the gingerbread cookies kind of Shrek style, you know what I mean? And then they're walking around and they're like sentient things that work for her. And the way we did that in game terms, by the way, was we actually treated it as force manipulation, which is the power the Green Lantern has. Just under the bonuses and limitations section, we said, it's not like energy or anything, it's baked goods. In terms of uh they're going to behave like baked goods. So the gingerbread men would have a hard time swimming, for instance, without coming kind of undone from being soaked in water for extended periods of time, stuff like that, right? But yeah, that was her, and she was awesome. And again, she's based on, and you'd have to Google these Rankin Bass characters. I can't tell you which Christmas special each one is from, but Jessica was Mrs. Claus in that stuff, and um, she was cool. I really liked her. And then going down, the tin soldiers or the toy soldiers, these guys were from the North Pole, and I remember trying to get somebody to play an elf We had established that there were elves at the North Pole. We said they were more like Dungeons and Dragons style elves, and they were tinkerers and stuff like that. And various people were talking about doing that. I remember there was a lot of talk of doing an adventure about the island of misfit toys. Um, there was going to be a Jack in the Box character at one point that was going to be like doing a pogo thing to get around, kind of springing around. Um, and we still have yet to really do that. It's on my bucket list of stuff I need to do. But so the that's where the tin soldiers come in. In terms of their functionality, they were supposed to work just like the gingerbread men. Um, but they work for Santa Claus instead of for Mrs. Claus. But yeah, they are supposed to be basically these kind of like steampunk robot soldiers, you know. Um, and then we get to the Yeti. The Yeti was really cool. Again, he appears in some stuff. Uh, and I hate to say it now, I can't remember who played the Yeti. Um, I want to say it's Tony Cambrera, who's a friend of mine. I think he played the Yeti maybe, but I'm not sure anymore. Um, and they basically ran him like the Hulk. You know what I mean? He was just massive. He was strong. He'd just go in and pound on stuff. Again, he's an old Rankin Bass character. And then last but not least was Yukon Cornelius, and he really stole the show. And he was played by my son. And I want to say that the Rankin Bass show that he's in is the old claymation Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer show. And he's just insane. He's he carries a pickaxe, and again, we kind of ripped off Mjolnir a little bit with the pickaxe. And one of the things he does on the show is like he'll hit stuff, and then he like frantically quickly licks the tip of the pickaxe, and he can tell exactly what it was he hit. So if he's like mining with it, he can lick it, and we gave him the detect power to know exactly what kind of metal that was, you know, so on and so forth. Um, and then my son, who is very calm, he takes his time, he's very like subdued, is his vibe, you know. He did such a good impression of Yukon Cornelius and just played him as just insane. And like he'd do the quick tongue thing and stuff, and like it was hilarious. Again, it doesn't translate well to me telling you a story, but if you were there and you saw it, you know, it was really, really funny. But yeah, he was just insane. I would compare him in a way a little bit to in the movie Braveheart. There's the one guy is Irish, and he's like, "It's my island," you know. It was a little bit like that. He was just this like insane dude, um, mining for gold in the middle of nowhere at the top of the world, you know. And then when it came to fighting, he was just tough. But that was the Christmas team, and they all teamed up and they fought Krampus. That was really cool. I'm trying to think of other stuff we've done over the years. Like the video's already really long. Um, I'll tell you what, because you know the channel is not going away anytime soon. And sometimes I like to replay old games. And I feel like since a lot of this stuff doesn't translate well to this format, maybe next Christmas we will replay some old games and do that instead of what we did this Christmas. And then that way you get to hear people actually interacting with each other, and it might be funnier that way. So yeah, we'll do that. I'll save some of the rest of it for that. As for this video, I think this is long enough. I'm going to wrap it up. Again, I hope you guys are having an awesome day. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know the routine, right? Smash like, check to see if you're subscribed, and as always, leave us a comment. I would love to hear if you guys uh, who play role-playing games, have you done Christmas-themed games? If so, what did you guys do? For the folks who listen who don't actually role play and are coming from more kind of the comic book end of the spectrum, Have you ever read a Christmas story in a comic book that you really liked? I'd love to hear about that. But yeah, let me know what what's what. And from everybody here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Bye.